Okay, so you will discover that at times, oftentimes, a quadratic equation, you won't be able to solve it by taking the square root of both sides because it'll have x squared and an x, or a y squared and a y. And you also won't be able to factor it because it will just be not factorable. You will look for factors that will work and they just don't. When that happens, you can either complete the square, which is something you would have learned in algebra and algebra 2, but you can also use what's called the quadratic formula, and this is typically what people choose to use, so that's why I'm going over it. Here's the quadratic formula. When you have an quadratic equation, a being the leading coefficient, or the number in front of the squared, b being the x term, okay, and c being the constant. We use this formula to find our two answers. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That will give you your solutions right away. You do have to make sure it's set equal to 0 first. So let's use this example up here. Our first term is to make sure it's equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 5y and subtract 1 from both sides so that I have it set equal to 0. Okay, our next step is to go ahead and plug the parts in the formula. Now notice if I tried to factor this, I would take the 2 times 1 is 2. There are no factors of 2 that add to equal 5. So I know I have to use the quadratic formula to solve this. We go ahead and plug into the formula. Again, a is this number in front of the y squared. B is the number in front of y. So b would be negative 5, and c is going to be negative 1. So we plug it into our formula, and we get negative b, so negative of negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 5 squared. And you want to be really careful on these. There's some common errors, just computational errors that can happen. 4 times a, again our a was that 2 in front, times c, the end term, which is negative 1. The whole thing is divided by 2 times a, which again, a is that leading coefficient of 2. And now we simplify. Again, be very careful here. First thing I notice is the minus negative 5 is a positive. Minus a negative makes that positive. Negative 5 squared is a positive 25. That's a common error. Make sure if you square a negative, it should always become positive. The next thing I want to do is watch my signs. When I do negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, times negative 1 is a positive 8. All divided by 2 times 2, which is 4. I go ahead and add the numbers underneath the radical. 25 plus 8 gives me 33. And again, the entire thing is over 4. Now you would want to check the radical underneath the square to make sure it's not a perfect square, and it's not. There's not a whole number square root for 33. Also, the only things that go into 33 are 3 and 11, neither of which are perfect squares. So this is as simplified as we get. We have our 2 solutions. Okay, notice there are 2 solutions there. One would be 5 plus the square root of 33 divided by 4, and the other would be 5 minus the square root of 33 divided by 4. And we could take out our calculator and find both answers in decimal form if we needed to. Okay, here is another example. So again, we start the same way, and we notice that we have an m and an m squared, so we know we're going to have to try and maybe factor, and if factoring doesn't work, use the quadratic formula. So again, our first step is to make sure that the equation is set equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides, which gives me 5m squared plus 3m minus 12 equals 0. If I try to factor, I again would have to take 5 first term times the last. 5 times negative 12 is negative 60. I would need factors of negative 60 that add to equal 3, which there just are not any. So I know I have to use the quadratic formula. Again, a is the number in front of your squared term. B is this middle term in front of our m, and C is always that number that doesn't have a variable with it. We plug it into the quadratic formula. So we do negative b, so negative of 3, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 3 squared, minus 4 times a, which was 5, times c, which was negative 12, all divided by 2 times a, which again was 5. And we keep going. So we have negative 3 plus or minus 3 squared is 9, and negative 4 times 5 times negative 12. Again, watch your sign. Be very careful. This turns out to be a positive 240. All divided by 2 times 5, which is 10. We go ahead and finish that up by adding the numbers under the radical. And we get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 249, all divided by 10. So there are two answers. Again, they would be negative 3 plus the square root of 249 divided by 10, and negative 3 minus the square root of 249 divided by 10. Okay, so if factoring isn't working, there's no factors that work out, but we have to use the quadratic formula, which is right down here. You want to have that handy because we're going to use it a lot in this class, and you would use that to find your answers.